It was one of those nights where the tension in the studio wasn't just expected, it was rehearsed. Friday evenings in Washington meant cable news panels, hot takes, and ideological fireworks. But that night, something different happened, something nobody fully saw coming. On set, under the blistering studio lights and in front of a quietly humming national audience, sat Judge Jeanine Pirro, poised in her signature red. Her posture was sharp, her tone sharper still. To her right sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, draped in charcoal gray, fingers interlaced calmly, face unreadable. She didn't come to rattle cages, but she came ready, just in case. The subject was judicial reform, a hot-button issue if there ever was one. Producers had whispered about the potential for spicy clips, and it was clear they were hoping for a few on-air skirmishes. What they got was far more potent. Jeanine didn't hesitate. She launched straight in. "Congresswoman," she said with an arch of her brow, "you've been making the rounds lately, trashing judges on TV like it's sport. Isn't that just emotional theater?" Jasmine turned her gaze toward Jeanine with a calm precision. "With all due respect, Judge," she began, her voice smooth but firm, "calling out judicial misconduct isn't emotional. It's a duty." Jeanine smirked, her smile laced with sarcasm. "Please. Your side has turned accountability into a slogan. You don't want reform, you want headlines." The moderator shifted awkwardly in his seat, sensing the growing heat. But Jeanine wasn't finished. She leaned in. "Let's be honest. What gives you the right to lecture anyone on ethics? You're not on the Judiciary Committee. You're new. So who exactly are you trying to impress?" That moment cracked something open. The panel went still. Jasmine didn't blink. "I practiced law for over a decade," she said plainly. "I've defended clients in courtrooms where the bench wasn't just biased, it was broken. That's not performance. That's experience." Jeanine let out a dismissive scoff. "That's what you claim. But when I wore the robe..." "You were cited 3 times for judicial misconduct." Jasmine cut in, her tone cutting through the air like glass. Not loud, just precise. The words hit the table like a dropped gavel. The room seemed to stop breathing. Even the camera crew leaned slightly forward. Jeanine froze. "Excuse me?" she asked, voice suddenly lower. "You heard me," Jasmine replied, eyes locked in. "We can go over the public records, if you'd like." Jeanine opened her mouth to push back, but no sound came. For the first time in the segment, she was quiet. The moderator tried to redirect, but the control in the room had already shifted. "That was political," Jeanine finally sputtered. "Baseless accusations." Jasmine didn't flinch. 2 of those citations were upheld. The 3rd got dismissed over a filing error. Facts aren't political. They're public. At that, the silence returned, but this time it wasn't awkward. It was heavy. A silence that sat with people. Jeanine tried again. "You're just playing the victim, like always," she snapped, trying to recapture the upper hand. Jasmine leaned forward slightly, voice low and steady. "You think I'm playing the victim? I'm holding power accountable. That used to be your job, remember? Until it wasn't." The tension on set became palpable. This wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It was surgical. And it wasn't over. Backstage, Jasmine's comms director, Simone Randall, watched the live feed from a monitor, one hand clutching her phone. She could read the tempo of the moment instantly. She texted the team group chat. "She's cooking. Stay tuned." When the show came back from commercial, the moderator tried to steer them into calmer waters. "Congresswoman Crockett, could you briefly outline your reform proposal?" Jasmine didn't hesitate. "Sure. The Judicial Ethics Oversight Act would mandate transparency, publicly searchable databases for disciplinary actions, stronger recusal standards, and required disclosures for judges." She placed the facts like cards on the table. No dramatics. Just data. Jeanine arched a brow. "Sounds like you're accusing the entire system of corruption." Jasmine shook her head gently. "I'm pointing to patterns. Patterns backed by rulings and lived experiences, mostly from people who can't afford million-dollar lawyers." Jeanine sat forward. "So you're the voice of the voiceless now." Jasmine's response was simple. "I'm not their voice. I'm their mic." It hit the panel like a wave. Theo Burns, a political journalist seated near them, let out an audible, "Damn," before catching himself on live TV. The moderator glanced his way, but the moment was already flying past him. Jeanine leaned in again, her tone sharp. "You think you know what justice looks like?" "I do," Jasmine responded. "I've watched prosecutors lie on transcripts. Judges fall asleep on the bench. I've watched black defendants get 5 times the sentence of white defendants for the same charges." "That's divisive," Jeanine snapped. "That's documented," Jasmine replied. "Judge Amos Greer, Travis County. Judge Evelyn Marks, Wichita Falls. We can keep naming names." Theo perked up. "Wait, you have the stats." Jasmine reached into her folder. "Yes. Want them?" She passed documents across the table, real, annotated, footnoted. One page slid to Theo. One to the moderator. "These are 12 judges flagged since 2016. 6 retired without penalty. 3 still preside. And 1, Jeanine knows this, was once her colleague." That landed like a meteor. Jeanine sat unmoving. Simone, still watching from the green room, whispered to herself, "Now we hit the gas." And Jasmine wasn't done. As the show cut to commercial, the tension didn't leave the room. It only settled deeper into the corners. The producers behind the cameras moved like a pit crew, murmuring fast into their earpieces, adjusting angles, cutting feeds, checking how far the clip had already traveled online. They knew what had just happened wasn't a regular debate moment. It wasn't rehearsed drama. It was raw, live, and unmistakably real. Jeanine Pirro sat stiffly in her seat. Her legs crossed so tightly the heel of her right shoe bounced, slightly in frustration. Her face, usually animated and unbothered, looked frozen. Her team scrambled behind the scenes, trying to prep her next move. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett remained still, calm, like nothing had happened. She leaned back ever so slightly, fingers lightly touching the folder in front of her. Inside, more receipts, documents, data, public records that weren't dramatic, but devastating when used correctly. Backstage, her communications director Simone Randall sat in a small viewing room, eyes locked on the monitor. She'd seen Jasmine go toe-to-toe before, in courtrooms, at hearings, but this was different. This was national television. "She's about to cook," Simone whispered to herself, sending a message to their staff chat. It was a mixture of pride and calculated awareness. She knew the blowback would come just as hard as the praise. Back on set, the moderator tried to smooth things over. "Let's pivot to policy," he said, voice carefully even. "Congresswoman Crockett, could you outline the reforms you're proposing?" Jasmine gave a slight nod and picked up the conversation like it hadn't been shaken. "Sure. It's called the Judicial Ethics Oversight Act. It includes mandatory public disclosures for federal judges, tighter recusal requirements, and a searchable public database of disciplinary records. Right now, too many judges operate behind a curtain, even after being flagged for misconduct." Her voice was smooth but firm, every syllable landing with purpose. Jeanine Pirro sat upright again, trying to recover. "That sounds nice on paper," she said with a short laugh. "But you're accusing the entire judiciary of corruption." "I'm pointing out patterns," Jasmine said, unfazed. "Patterns we've ignored. Patterns backed by data, by outcomes, and by the stories of people who never had the money or power to fight back." Jeanine's jaw clenched. "And you're the voice of the people now." "I don't need to be their voice," Jasmine said, allowing the faintest curl at the edge of her lips. "I'm just their mic." The panel was silent for a beat, too stunned to react in real time. One of the younger panelists, a political journalist named Theo Burns, let out a small audible chuckle. "Damn," he mouthed before his camera was quickly cut off. Jeanine wasn't used to being silenced. She leaned forward, fighting to retake the spotlight. "You walk in here pretending like you know what real justice looks like," she snapped. "I do know," Jasmine said, sharper now. "I've seen prosecutors lie in court. I've seen judges fall asleep during hearings. I've stood in courtrooms where black men were handed 5 times the sentence for the same charges white men walked away from." Jeanine recoiled slightly. "That's divisive. It's inflammatory." It's documented, Jasmine countered. Look at Judge Amos Greer in Travis County. Or Judge Evelyn Marks in Wichita Falls. The numbers don't lie. It's not about race until you track the outcomes. Theo leaned in again. Wait, you have stats on that? I do, Jasmine said, calmly reaching under the table and pulling out a folder, not for show, but because she always came prepared. She slid a copy to the moderator and another to Theo. Here are 12 judges flagged for misconduct since 2016. 6 retired without a single consequence. 3 still hold court today. One of them was a former colleague of Judge Pirro. She turned and met Jeanine's gaze. There was no venom, just clarity. Jeanine didn't respond. Behind the scenes, Simone muttered to herself, and now we hit the gas. As the commercial break returned, there was a subtle shift on set. The power had changed hands, and everyone knew it. Jasmine hadn't raised her voice once, but she'd moved the room like a chess player, with a clear strategy. The moderator tried to retake control. Let's, try to keep this constructive. Congresswoman, what's the endgame here? Public shaming. Jasmine's gaze turned toward him, calm as ever. The endgame is accountability. I don't believe in tearing down systems unless we're ready to build something better. But pretending it's not broken? That's how injustice survives. Theo was still scanning the documents. Some of these names have never hit headlines, he said. That's the point, Jasmine replied. Misconduct thrives in silence. When no one's watching, it grows. Jeanine finally leaned forward again, her voice tight, her tone brittle. You're making it sound like I personally covered up corruption. You haven't been a judge in years, Jasmine replied, but you still act like you're above being questioned. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was just true. And that made it land harder. Across the country, millions were watching. Viewers paused their dinners, picked up their phones, and started rewinding the clip in disbelief. Some uploaded snippets. Others added soundtracks. One TikTok user looped Jasmine's line. I'm not their voice. I'm their mic. Over a slow zoom in on Jeanine's stunned expression. Within hours, it had gone viral. Simone's phone buzzed with a text from a journalist friend. Was that real? Or rehearsed? Because it felt surgical. Simone replied in 3 words. Every second. Real. By the time the show ended, the internet was already lit up. Media personalities, influencers, even legal experts were weighing in. A constitutional law professor tweeted a full thread breaking down Jasmine's performance. What Congresswoman Crockett did tonight wasn't a viral moment. It was a lesson in composed advocacy. Even people who disagreed with her politics acknowledged the skill. A conservative host, known for bashing the left, tweeted, not a fan of her views, but Crockett came armed with facts and discipline. Respect the prep. On her flight back to Dallas that night, Jasmine kept her phone on airplane mode, not to tune out the world, but to give herself an hour of peace. She sat beside Simone, who looked equal parts exhausted and exhilarated. I told you it'd blow up, Simone said with a half smile. Jasmine exhaled. It's not the attention I worry about, she said. It's what comes after. Simone nodded slowly. The backlash. Always. And it had already started. A right-wing blog ran the headline before sunrise. Crockett ambushes Pirro with out-of-context claims. Social media cheers rudeness. Simone read it aloud at baggage claim. Jasmine didn't even flinch. They're just mad someone did homework, she said. But not all the noise was negative. A retired teacher in Ohio emailed Jasmine's office saying, my husband and I saw your segment. We don't usually watch political panels, but I felt something I haven't felt in a long time. Relief. Someone came prepared. Someone told the truth. A law student in Oregon tweeted, I've been second-guessing law school lately. Then I saw Jasmine Crockett stand her ground without shouting. I feel recharged. And then there was the email from a conservative woman in Nebraska. I don't agree with you on most things. But last night, I saw someone defend her beliefs with facts and grace. You didn't insult. You didn't perform. You just did the work. I respect the hell out of that. At her kitchen table, Jasmine read that message 3 times before closing her laptop. Simone, sitting across from her, asked gently, What are you thinking? Jasmine looked up with a soft smile. Maybe facts still matter. Maybe people are tired of the noise. Maybe letting the truth speak for itself isn't so old school after all. Simone grinned. Or maybe we just got the whole country's attention. By Monday morning, the shockwave of Jasmine Crockett's moment was no longer just viral. It was institutional. While Jeanine Pirro arrived at the Fox studios in Manhattan flanked by aides, her expression unreadable and movements brisk, Jasmine Crockett walked into her South Dallas district office to the sight of a growing line. People, some constituents, others admirers from miles away, were already waiting to greet her. Inside, the phones were ringing nonstop. Simone was already fielding requests from over 30 newsrooms. We've had 35 interview asks since 8 a.m., she whispered, flipping through her notes. Jasmine didn't even glance at the list. Only schedule what's meaningful, she said. We're not chasing microphones. As Jasmine moved through the office, shaking hands and thanking those who showed up, an older man in his 70s held out a worn printout of the TV segment's transcript. I printed this for my granddaughter, he said, voice trembling. She's in high school. Wants to be a lawyer. She watched you and said, "That's how I want to sound." Jasmine placed a hand gently over his. "Tell her to keep going," she said, even when people try to talk over her. But the love wasn't all that came pouring in. Back in D.C., the political machine had also taken notice. Committee aides were already murmuring about Jasmine's momentum. An anonymous Democratic strategist told Roll Call she was already on the rise. This just launched her into orbit. Of course, orbit came with debris. Jasmine's office had received over 200 voicemails that weekend, some filled with gratitude, others with hate. Simone played the worst for Capitol Police. One message, nearly incoherent with rage, threatened to show up with a rope. Another spat out slurs and told Jasmine to go back where she came from. An ironic threat considering she was born and raised in Dallas County. Simone was firm. They need to hear it, she said. We're not pretending this doesn't come with risk. Jasmine, however, remained unmoved. I didn't go on that show for applause. I went because there's a rot we've let fester too long. And if naming it makes people this angry, then we've got even more work to do than I thought. Later that afternoon, she met with a group of judges and attorneys at the George Allen Courthouse. It was private, closed-door, tense. Some in the room were visibly uncomfortable. Judge Leland Pratt, a white man in his 60s with a reputation for straight shooting, spoke up first. Congresswoman, he began, cautious but direct. Some of us feel your comments on national television could erode public trust in the judiciary. Jasmine met his gaze without blinking. Judge Pratt, she replied. With respect, the public already doesn't trust the judiciary. I'm not the cause. I'm the mirror. The room went quiet. Then Judge Marisol Quintana, a younger Latina judge with a progressive bent, leaned forward. Honestly, I appreciated what you said. You said what most of us are too cautious to admit. The silence in this field is deafening. Jasmine nodded. I'm not here to tear it down. I'm here to stop the system from pretending it's perfect. They didn't all agree with her, but they listened, and that mattered. That night, back at home, Jasmine sat on her porch. The Texas heat had mellowed, replaced by a soft evening breeze. Simone texted her with news. MSNBC had sent a formal invite for a second appearance. Jasmine looked at the screen, sighed quietly, and turned her phone face down. Tonight wasn't about another appearance. Tonight was about breathing, about recalibrating. But rest didn't mean retreat, because the next step was already waiting. And this time, she wasn't just a guest. She was a voice reshaping the conversation. By the time Thursday arrived, Jasmine Crockett's name wasn't just trending. It was resonating. She had gone from a rising Texas congresswoman to a voice people were beginning to rally around. Not because she chased the spotlight, but because she held her ground when it found her. Cable news anchors still opened their shows with what they were now calling the moment. Clips of her calm rebuttal to Jeanine Pirro's accusations had become a cultural shorthand, shared not just by political pundits, but by students, teachers, and everyday Americans hungry for something more than noise. Even late-night shows had taken notice, not mocking Jasmine but playfully acknowledging how Pirro had brought a bullhorn to a chess match. A political cartoon went viral that morning. It showed Jasmine quietly moving a queen on a chessboard, while her opponent knocked the board over mid-move. The caption read, "Facts don't flinch." But none of that seemed to shift Jasmine's core. Praise didn't inflate her, it grounded her. She had no interest in being a symbol. What she wanted, what she had always wanted, was to be useful. That morning, she arrived at the studio of Dallas Morning Live, a local but widely respected morning program. The producer met her at the door, half smiling as he said, "We're not going to ambush you." Jasmine chuckled softly, replying, "That's good. I only brought facts today." Inside, the interview covered everything from the viral exchange to her legislative priorities. She spoke about policy, about why accountability wasn't hostility, and why calling out injustice, even when uncomfortable, was part of the job. And this time, people were listening. After the show, she stepped outside into the summer sun. A small group had gathered, local supporters, young women clutching notebooks, elders waving respectfully from a distance. She took time with each of them. No cameras, no grandstanding, just presence. That afternoon, she met with her policy team. While the internet debated tone and tactics, Jasmine was already deep in work, drafting a new proposal aimed at increasing transparency in federal judicial ethics. It wasn't flashy, but it was necessary. Simone looked up from her laptop. "You know, this could actually gain traction, especially after all this." Jasmine didn't look up. "It should gain traction because it's right, not because I got camera time." Simone nodded. "Still people are watching now." "Then let's make it count." Back in Washington, a quiet buzz was forming. Senior aides in key committees had started mentioning Jasmine in conversations about future leadership. Her colleagues, some of whom had barely acknowledged her months before, were now approaching her with new interest. Not all of it was friendly, but it was attention, and attention in politics, when used wisely, could shift the ground. That evening, Jasmine returned home to a quiet porch and the soft hum of cicadas. Her phone vibrated again, another network request, another invitation to speak, another opportunity to stay in the center of it all. She let the screen light dim before flipping the phone face down. Tonight wasn't about exposure. Tonight was about remembering why she stepped into the arena in the first place. Because at the heart of the viral moment, beyond the memes and the headlines, was a simple truth. Jasmine Crockett had come with facts, with steadiness, and with purpose. And while the storm might swirl around her, she wasn't moving with it. She was moving through it. Not to become famous. To become effective.